Hey guys, Mr. Gold back again. Now I'm sure many of you are familiar with Dr. Huberman's alcohol video, and probably many more were disappointed when he told you there isn't really any beneficial level of consumption. He did also say if anyone had any clinical studies showing otherwise to please share them. I've got more than just a few, so let's dive in shortly. But first, for new viewers who didn't see the last video, we're going to go over what's called the evidence pyramid, and the concept of the no observed adverse effect level. The evidence pyramid is a tool we use to examine the credibility of clinical evidence, with the top of the pyramid being the best quality, and the bottom being the lowest quality evidence, with systematic reviews and meta-analyses, randomized controlled trials, and cohort studies being the top three. The no observed adverse effect level of a substance is the amount administered or ingested that causes no negative effects or outcomes. I'm also going to use the UK unit to talk about alcohol consumption, as this is the roundest unit of measure, equaling 10 milliliters of pure ethanol. Bear in mind, not all studies use this metric, and I will quote those that do otherwise. So first and foremost, let's talk about Dr. Huberman's claim that any amount of drinking has negative effects on brain structure. He alluded to any amount having a dose-dependent negative effect on cortical thickness. Looking at this study, we can see that this holds true for only a certain group of drinkers. So as we can see here, those consuming between 1 and less than 7 UK units of alcohol per week have no differences in brain structure measures compared to non-drinkers. Astonishingly, one study even showed light alcohol use to be associated with increased cortical grey matter amongst those consuming a mean of 7 drinks per week. Although at this higher level than the previous one, there were also negative effects as far as decreased white matter were concerned. So if alcohol was truly only negative for the brain, we wouldn't see meta-analyses like these showing that light drinkers had a 32% risk reduction in Alzheimer's disease compared to non-drinkers. Keeping in mind a meta-analysis is at the very top of the evidence pyramid. Alcohol also doesn't cause violent behavior like commonly thought. Only a minority of individuals become aggressive after alcohol consumption, and like with other drugs, only those genetically predisposed to such outcomes. Alcohol simply acts as an amplifier of the current psychological state. So moving away from brain and behavior, all of this begs the question, what is the no observed adverse effect level for alcohol across all health outcomes and indeed all-cause mortality itself? And does alcohol have any measurable health benefits at the no observed adverse effect level like we found for smoking and vaping in the previous video? Let's start with the famous 2018 Lancet study that declared no amount of alcohol consumption is safe. We can find their own results table conflict with this conclusion as far as practical recommendations go. The reason being why we don't just read study abstracts and draw conclusions, rather look at the entire study's results. So let's go down to the results page. Looking at the cancer metrics for both males and females, at a consumption level of 0.5 drinks per day, or the equivalent of 3.5 per week, we can see the relative risk for both conditions are very small, going down to lip and oral cavity cancers for males right now. The green shaded area and the line barely move up in the graph. There's also notable J-curve, or beneficial effects, as far as risk reductions for diabetes and ischemic heart disease go, where you can see the curve actually dips down as drinking level goes up initially and then goes back up once the drinking level increases. So of course, in this case, there is a point where too much is bad, but we can see that a very small amount the curve goes down almost immediately at the 0.5 drinks mark. The same for males and females. So let's go look at the overall risk graph. We can see that the green shading, indicating relative risk, only begins to visibly rise after 0.5 drinks per day, and the rise is very slight. Thus, we can conclude that a level of no more than 3.5 drinks per week, or 182 drinks per year, is the rough no observed adverse effect level. Keep in mind these are standard drinks, roughly 1.2 times the size of a UK unit, which would be around 4.2 UK units per week as an equivalent. So looking at one of these common beneficial effects of alcohol, in this case, the risk of stroke, this cohort study on over 22,000 adults, keeping in mind cohort studies are still a high third place on the evidence pyramid, they found that 1 drink per week had a protective effect against ischemic stroke, with a greater consumption level of 1 drink per day not increasing the benefit, showing there's no benefit in exceeding the no observed adverse effect level in this instance. Looking at this study, there also seems to be no benefit when you drink too infrequently as well, at least in this study examining the anti-atherosclerotic effects of alcohol, with alcohol consumption less than once a week having no protective effect against atherosclerosis. Those drinking at least once a week enjoy a deceleration in atherogenesis. So while alcohol is indeed an IARC Group 1 carcinogen, and when consumed above the no observed adverse effect level, marked increases in the risk of oral and breast cancer occur. Alcohol guidelines were actually revised because of this after the Lancet study came out. Increased incidence of stomach and pancreatic cancer are also risks at levels around 3 or more drinks consumed per day. It may come as a surprise, but alcohol actually reduces the risk of a handful of cancers, thyroid cancer being the one we can see here in this study, this meta-analysis to be specific. Renal cell carcinoma, another meta-analysis. Renal cell carcinoma is a form of kidney cancer, and the protective effect here is particularly strong and noted even at very low levels of drinking. Lung cancer is also a cancer which alcohol reduces the risk of, and this was also within the no observed adverse effect level, given 5 grams a day is roughly 3.5 drinks per week. Finally, this review shows that drinking alcohol reduces the risk of non-Hodgkin lymphoma as well, showing a relative risk reduction at less than 1 drink per day too. So alcohol is probably best known as an antimicrobial and disinfectant, and this effect carries over in vivo as well, with it reducing the risk of Helicobacter pylori infection in the stomach, a bacterial pathogen that is responsible for the majority of peptic ulcer cases and also an independent risk factor for stomach cancer as well. In this meta-analysis, we can see that it recommends drinking wine and mixed types of alcohol are better in terms of reducing H. pylori infection than drinking beer. An interesting conclusion. Okay, light alcohol consumption at or below the no observed adverse effect level isn't as bad as we previously thought. But surely it can't be good for bodybuilding and fitness endeavors, right? Hopefully by now you guys are noticing a trend on this channel. This is also once again not the case, despite plenty of noise indicating otherwise from YouTube and Instagram fitness content creators. I'd like to personally thank esteemed fitness author and founder of the Lean Gains program, Martin Burkhan, for dispelling these myths a decade ago with his popular article, The Truth About Alcohol, Fat Loss, and Muscle Growth. I highly recommend everyone give it a read, and I credit him with the studies he links in this article going forward. So we know that alcohol isn't processed like other macronutrients, and replacing an equal number of calories from carbohydrates with ethanol leads to weight loss, meaning alcohol calories don't quite count the same as calories from other sources, likely due to its effects on catecholamine release, its resulting thermogenic effect, and its ability to promote leanness due to acting as an insulin sensitizer. With this effect, of course, translating to a reduced risk of type 2 diabetes, even below the no observed adverse effect level, although peak effect occurred at around 1 drink per day in this review. So in this randomized controlled trial, we can see that even a relatively large acute alcohol intoxication of around 5 drinks in one sitting had no effect on strength or recovery. They used 1.4 grams per liter blood alcohol concentration measurement, which varies based on patient weight. In another randomized controlled trial, 1 gram per kilogram of ethanol, or just around 10 units for someone of my body weight, was needed to cause a measurable negative effect on recovery. Surprisingly, no human studies have been done examining alcohol and protein synthesis, but if we look at this study examining alcoholics and moderate drinking control subjects, the alcoholics had the same amount of lean mass with less fat mass than the moderate drinkers. When one would assume if protein synthesis worsens with more alcohol consumed, the alcoholics should in theory have lower lean mass compared to the controls, which isn't the case. Okay, this is all well and good, but what about alcohol and testosterone? Lots of studies show it reduces it, but those studies also involve either, in this case, a high dose, 1.5 grams of ethanol per kilogram, or chronic administration, in this case, 30 to 40 grams for 3 weeks. As we can see in this study, an acute intake of 0.5 grams per kilogram actually increases testosterone by around 18.5%. This would equate to just under 5 UK units for my body weight. The in-between amount, where testosterone is neither lowered nor increased, is around 0.8 grams per kilogram. We can see that in this study, where alcohol was administered acutely post-exercise, and was shown that concentrations of testosterone were not affected by either treatment. And we can see in the methods section ethanol ingestion was equal to 0.83 grams per kilogram. So as a practical recommendation for those without a family history of alcoholism or other substance use disorders who already drink alcohol, I'd see no issue shooting for 1 or 2 drinking evenings per week at or below 4 UK units spread across those 1 or 2 evenings. However, if you find it difficult to adhere closely to this amount compared to complete abstinence, due to alcohol's very small J-curve, it is safer not to drink than to drink at a level that exceeds the no observed adverse effect level in most instances. The same goes for smoking in my previous video, of course. Use the Lancet graphs and drinking levels in the aforementioned studies as your guide for making this decision. And know that the further you drink above the no observed adverse effect level, the more you increase your risk of various disease states in a dose-dependent manner. Alcohol isn't as safe as the old guidelines led us to believe, but it also isn't so dangerous that abstinence is required. For those interested in bodybuilding as well, I'd recommend making sure those drinks are consumed with or ideally after your final meal of the day, since alcohol suppresses fat oxidation and hence dietary fat and to a lesser extent carbohydrates consumed alongside alcohol are more likely to lead to excess fat storage. Building on this, I'd also recommend not consuming any non-alcohol calories after this last meal and while drinking for this same reason. The majority of people who so-called get fat from alcohol aren't getting fat from the alcohol itself, rather the junk they eat alongside it, as alcohol itself is a poor substrate for fat synthesis. Have dinner, Have drinks later, don't eat or snack, don't have anything until breakfast the next morning if you eat breakfast, or until meal 1, roughly 16 hours later, after your last intake of calories, alcohol included in this case, if you do intermittent fasting like Martin Burkhan and myself. Ideally, schedule your drinking evenings when there's a rest day from the gym the next day, as alterations in hydration status due to alcohol can affect performance if you don't replace lost fluids and electrolytes. To go even further, if you have more than one consecutive rest day like I do, I train 3 days a week, so Saturday and Sunday are my rest days. I have my drinking evening on Saturday. I also have less calories on rest days compared to training days, so this just allows for less of an opportunity for extra fat storage due to the suppression in fat oxidation caused by alcohol. I must say, however, if you are sticking to the no observed adverse effect level, the aforementioned effect will be negligible. I personally just like to keep things as dialed as possible. Realize there are good and better choices with everything. Once again, those who do not already drink should not start due to the risk of alcoholism outweighing any of the aforementioned benefits. I personally have taken over a year off drinking entirely after the Lancet study came out and noticed no benefits as far as sleep, energy levels, bodybuilding progress, or anything else for that matter. But that being said, I only used to drink around 6 to 18 units per week across 3 to 4 days in the week. I never drank daily or as much as many others do in the West. I now stick to the no observed adverse effect level of 4 units or less per week across 1 to 2 days of the week. Some of those units indeed being part of the Boulevardier I was drinking in the thumbnail. Some of you may be wondering how you determine how many units are in a given drink. Let's take this example. A 355 ml can of 4.2% alcohol by volume, Coors Lager. We multiply the total volume of 355 ml by the percent alcohol by volume expressed as a fraction of 1. So 0.042 to get 14.91 ml of pure ethanol, or 1.491 UK units, as 1 UK unit is 10 milliliters of ethanol. A lot of the studies quantify alcohol in grams and standard drinks, since alcohol is less dense than water. This 10 ml amount equals 8 grams of ethanol at room temperature, with 10 grams ethanol in one standard drink in Australia, for example. Hopefully this video showed you that those who say alcohol is poison are just generating sensationalism and alarmism without evidence. As the Swiss physician Paracelsus famously said, all things are poison, nothing is without poison. Only the dose makes a thing not a poison. A cornerstone of toxicology, as even water has a lethal dose. Stay gold, comment your thoughts below, like the video if you enjoyed it, and subscribe for more.